Well everyone, thanks for joining me. Don't be confused by how many layers I have on. It is actually May when I'm recording this, but we've had a cold snap come through. But today I am down along the coastline, and my goal for this video is to go over the basics of how to shoot video for wildlife photography. So we're going to go over the basic settings, the basic modes you need to be aware of, all the different kinds of things that'll make you more comfortable in shooting video. Now, video can be a really kind of confusing and just overwhelming thing for a lot of people. This is going to be hopefully just a really basic rundown so that you can switch your camera into video mode and start capturing good video of the animals you see in front of you. Video is really an awesome tool because it allows you to see more action and more of the intricacies for wildlife and the behavior and what they're doing. Obviously, if you're interested in just capturing photos, that's fine. You don't need to do video. But a lot of these cameras, especially mirrorless cameras nowadays, have really capable video functions. So we're going to go into some of those, and maybe you'll be able to confidently go into video mode and start capturing some video of the animals you see in front of you. So I'm set up along the coast here. I'm kind of, this is the marshy side, the ocean's back over that way. And I'm set myself up here because there have been some sparrows and some yellow warblers that have been in among these reeds here. There was actually a deer that was right in front of me here a little while ago. It's since moved back into the hedgerow. But there's also some ospreys out here, some willets. There's some clapper rails that I'm hearing. So I'm just going to sit here, go over the basic functions and settings of the camera and video mode. And then we're also going to hopefully get some videos and photos of some wildlife out here. Now I have my external monitor on, so we're going to be able to see what I see through my viewfinder. I can go over the settings that way, so hopefully have a really clear understanding of what I'm doing and how I'm doing it and why I'm doing it. And yeah, so let's get into it.
If you're new to my channel, my name is Todd DeWald and I'm a full-time wildlife and conservation photographer in beautiful New England. It is my goal to take you along to explore the amazing diversity of wildlife that call this area home, sharing with you my education to make us all better naturalists and better photographers. It is my hope that my videos will spark an interest in the wildlife in your area, so that together, through photography, we can preserve the natural places that remain. Consider subscribing to my channel to learn more, and thank you for watching.
Okay, so I'm going to start by just going over the basics of getting your camera into video mode, understanding what the buttons are for video mode and how you can adjust them and how I customize my camera. So I use Nikon, and Nikon has a really nice switch that you're able to switch just from photo to video mode just by simply switching that. So that switches you right into video mode immediately. It's a really quick and easy way if you're trying to take some photos, but then, oh, this might be interesting for video, say if there's some action happening or something moving. It's typically the best thing for video. So you can easily switch right into video. I know a lot of other camera brands have that option as well with just a lever to switch between photo and video, or you can make it so that you type a button and it switches you into video mode. I like that because it allows you to go right into video quickly. I don't take still images from videos because the quality's not as good. So if you see any photos in many of my YouTube videos, that is actually photos from photo mode that I'm taking photos, and I'm switching between photo mode and video mode to get that. From there, I customize my camera and all the buttons in video mode the same as I have them in photo mode, with a couple of exceptions. So up top you have the record button. It's typically some kind of red button. So that's going to be the start to record button. I keep the AF on button still as the AF on activation mode, so I can activate autofocus that way. I still have my joystick set to move my autofocus box, and a lot of the other settings are the same there. Just allows me to have muscle memory, so if I'm switching between photo mode and video mode often, which I am, I'm able to use the same buttons and know exactly which buttons do what. And I don't have to think, oh, I'm in video mode now, I need to do this button to do this thing, when it's different in photo mode. It just makes it so it's a lot easier, it's simpler to use, which is really the goal, because you don't want to have to think about too much what you're doing when you're trying to get videos. I have my front FN1 button, which is customized to change autofocus area mode. So I'm able to do that and then switch the back dial here, and that changes between my autofocus area modes. I'm able to cycle through that, gets me really quick to where I need to go. I typically am using WC1 and WC2 area modes for autofocus. For Nikon, it allows you to have animal detect, eye detect. I'm constantly using either bird detect or animal detect for the autofocus modes. Hold on, there's an ibis flying over. Okay, the ibis is foraging not too far away from me, which is really, really awesome, but it's down in some deeper grass right now. Especially if you have something that's moving pretty quickly or a larger animal, you're going to want to use a larger autofocus area mode box, right? Just the same thing with photo. So if, especially if a bird is moving, a bird is flying, and you want to get some video of it, have a larger box so that your autofocus will be more likely to capture that bird or that animal moving, and you don't have to be pinpoint right on the animal all the time. Now there is AFF mode in a lot of cameras, which is full-time autofocus, which basically means that whatever your autofocus box is over in the viewfinder, your camera is going to constantly autofocus on that object. You're not going to have to press the AF on button. But I don't typically like that for video. I use it for my vlogging setup a lot because can't press the autofocus on button all the time. But for my wildlife work, I find that it typically doesn't work very well for a couple of reasons, because especially for wildlife, they often are moving between sticks and trees and branches and such. And if you end up moving the autofocus box over something that you don't want to focus on, your camera is going to focus on that anyway, and you really don't have control over what your camera is focusing on. I have it set to AFC, just like I do in photo mode, because now I'm able to essentially have single autofocus when I tap and release the autofocus on button, and I'm also able to have that full-time autofocus mode if I'm pressing and holding the AF on button. So it gives me that AFF mode essentially with AFC because I'm able to press and hold the AF on button, and it works really well, especially if you have an open environment like this one where we still have some grass and reeds and such in the way, but it's a mostly open environment. So I'm able to actually press and hold and still have really good results. Autofocus in the camera typically has an easy enough job staying locked onto the animal, especially with eye detect. Now this ibis is moving, so I'm going to try to get some more footage of it here. Now what you see with this is a good example of how the autofocus can get tripped up pretty quickly, even with this grass moving here. Because even with the grass blades kind of in between me and the bird, the autofocus is having a hard time recognizing that that's the bird that you want to keep tracking on. So a lot of times, especially with a wading bird like this, you don't want to end up getting into a habit of just pressing and holding the autofocus button, because you'll end up missing focus and the focus will jump back and forth. So with a bird like this, you want to kind of tap the autofocus button when the bird is up so the camera can lock onto it. And then as the bird dips its head down, you want to kind of release the autofocus so that your autofocus doesn't all of a sudden jump to the background or jump to the foreground because the bird kind of disappeared for a few seconds. Watch the behavior of the animal and tap the autofocus when the animal is clearly view, because otherwise you're going to have a really hard time bouncing focus back and forth, and then you're going to end up just having no focus at all, and your footage isn't going to look too good. We've gotten really reliant on autofocus for photo mode, so especially with animal detect and eye detect, it becomes really easy to basically get proper focus in photo mode. With video mode, it's still tricky because you can't always become reliant on the autofocus of the camera. A lot of times the autofocus still gets tripped up, so you can't always rely on it. So what you need to end up doing is using manual focus to get your focus proper. Now, before you get too concerned about thinking you need to use manual mode to focus on things, there's a really useful thing for a lot of cameras now that they have, which is called focus peaking. So focus peaking is basically when you turn the focus ring on your lens, it's going to illuminate the area in your viewfinder what is in focus. So it basically allows you to see what's in focus to a more detailed extent than just basically what you can see with your eye. So that allows you to confidently adjust focus with your manual focus ring, and allows you to keep that animal in focus based on what is highlighted on the focus peaking. It's really useful and something I actually end up using a lot and actually rely on it a lot compared to just what my autofocus for my camera is able to do. Because especially if you have an animal that's moving around a lot or is moving behind a lot of sticks and branches and constantly behind things, you're not going to have very much success with the autofocus in your camera, no matter how good your autofocus in your camera is. So I revert to manual focus and use the focus peaking there to keep focus on the subject even as it's moving behind objects. Is really useful. Definitely something that I recommend trying out and using. It's just something you need to get used to, get the hang of. Just like everything else, we weren't perfect with all the photo settings and stuff when we started doing photography. It's the same thing with video work. It just takes time to get used to it. It takes time to understand how your camera works and how the video mode works. Another thing that really is beneficial for using manual focus and focus peaking is, say your subject moved just a little bit, say if it was on a perch kind of farther away and then moved to a closer perch, you're able to bring in manual focus and bring your focus in closer relative to where your subject is, and then engage your autofocus so that you can then quickly use the autofocus and get proper immediate focus with the eye detect, compared to relying on manual focus all the time, but using the manual focus to get that close. Because a lot of times if your animal you're trying to get focus on is kind of too out of focus, your camera's going to have a really hard time getting focus. So use the manual focus to get close, to have that kind of the animal visible in your viewfinder, so then you can engage your autofocus and your camera can take over the rest of focusing. So it's really beneficial. It's really something you just have to get used to using, and it's really, really, really good for video work. Another thing you can do is set up your camera, your autofocus system in your camera, to basically make it so that it's more delayed when, say, the subject you're trying to photograph goes behind a tree or behind a stick or some leaves. You can set it so that your camera is delayed in trying to then find that animal again, because you don't want it to jump focus. You want it to kind of stay there, so that if you're maybe not as fast as releasing the autofocus button, your camera's not going to immediately jump to the background. It's going to be more of a gradual focusing change, which should be really helpful in your footage, helps you get cleaner, nicer looking footage. Now, as we're talking about how you have your cameras customized and set up, I like to definitely have my histogram set up on my LCD screen. For video especially, you really need to be able to see what your exposure is, because a lot of times you can't necessarily always tell what it's going to look like when you finally have the video out of camera, like on a computer screen, without the histogram. A lot of times it looks good on your LCD, but it really is dark or it's too bright. So having the histogram on your LCD so you can really see it, especially when you're doing video, is really important and really helps you out get proper exposure. So then, as we're talking about exposure, the biggest thing that a lot of people get confused on is the whole idea of how do you get proper exposure now that you have to also deal with frame rates and shutter speeds and shutter angles and your apertures and all that kind of things. Now, it's really simple, and I'm going to try to keep it really simple here. So aperture is the same as photo mode, okay? And then your ISO is the same as well. Now, your values are going to be different than photo mode a lot of times, because you have to consider what your frame rate is and what your shutter speed or shutter angle is going to be. Now, for a lot of cameras, a lot of brands, you only have shutter speed similar to how you have it in photo mode. Nikon has recently introduced the idea of shutter angle, which is basically the same kind of thing as shutter speed, but it allows you to have a shutter angle, which is it's just kind of an easier way, especially if you're changing between frame rates for your video, but we're not going to get into that, okay? We're going to try to keep it simple and just kind of consider the basics so that we can get into video mode for you. So your shutter speed or shutter angle has to do with what your frame rate is going to be. So there's a couple different frame rates you can choose from. The standard is going to be basically a 25 or 29 frame rate. So that is basically standard motion. So if you're just kind of shooting a standard video of somebody talking or somebody doing something, that's going to be shot typically at the 29.97, I believe it is, or 30 frame rate, 30p frame rate. So that's just standard motion, okay? The next one up from that is 60p. So that is basically, it allows you to slow down your footage a little bit. So a lot of times when you're editing your videos, you're going to have a base frame rate for your video when you're editing. So a lot of times that base frame rate is 30p or 29.97. We're just going to call it 30 for simplicity's sake. So that's your base frame rate, okay? So when I'm editing my videos for YouTube, my base frame rate is that 29.97 or 30p, okay? So if I'm shooting my regular, my vlogging footage, which I shoot at the 30p, I don't need to adjust the speed of that footage at all, okay? So that's just how it is. I don't need to adjust the speed of it. If I shoot video in 60p, that allows me to slow down that footage to half speed. So it allows you to get some slow motion footage with that frame rate. Now you can also shoot at 120p, which allows you to get even slower footage. So that, if I have the base frame rate of 30p, I'm able to slow down that footage to a quarter of the speed. So it allows me to get really nice, smooth, and a lot slower footage of movement and wildlife doing what they're doing. So those are, we're just going to call those the basic 3 frame rates you're going to have to choose from. Other cameras allow you to do 240, which is going to allow you to have some super slow motion footage. But for most cameras, you have the 30p, 60p, and the 120p. I shoot in 30p, standard frame rate, if I'm just photographing or videoing something that isn't really doing much. So just kind of like the static footage of wildlife, or maybe wildlife that's maybe eating but not really doing anything too active, because you don't want to end up slowing down footage where there's not really much action, okay? It's going to be kind of boring footage. It's just going to drag out. There's no real need to slow it down. Now, I will slow down footage if maybe there's some action. So if a bird is about to take off and I want to capture that slow motion footage of the bird taking off, or maybe there's a bird that's foraging, but they forage really quickly, or a bird just flying in the air, something that you really want to capture and be able to see the slow motion of that footage, I will shoot that in slow motion. Where the importance of frame rate comes in is that based on your frame rate that you have, that impacts what your shutter speed needs to be to capture that footage properly, okay? So if you are shooting at the base 30p frame rate, what you're going to need for your shutter speed is, it's basically double what your frame rate is, okay? So if you're shooting at 30p, your frame rate needs to be a minimum of 1/60. If you're shooting at 60p, your slowest shutter speed you can do to capture that video and actually slow down that footage is 1/120 for your shutter speed. 120p, you need to shoot at double that, so it would be 1/240. If you end up trying to shoot slow motion video at 120p, but you forget to adjust your shutter speed, say you kept it at 60 because you were shooting at 30p before, when you go and try to slow down that footage when you're editing the videos, you're going to end up with really choppy footage because your shutter speed wasn't fast enough to capture enough frames in that time frame, is basically what's happening. So now how do I set up my camera to get the proper exposure when I'm doing video? The first thing I want to do is, what is my frame rate going to be, okay? Because that impacts what your shutter speed is going to be. So if I set my, say I have my frame rate at 60p, okay, well I know I need my shutter speed at 1/120, okay? So that takes that right there. Next, you want to kind of do your aperture. So aperture, obviously for video work, it's actually beneficial to have a wider aperture to allow you to have a deeper depth of field, especially if you're just starting out, because if you have, if you always use your widest aperture, say if I have an f4 lens, if you're always using your f4 lens, you're going to have a really shallow depth of field, which can be tricky to start out with because of that shallow depth of field, you might lose focus a lot. So start out with a wider depth of field, maybe do f8 or something like that to allow you to have some wiggle room to have a wider depth of field. More is going to be in focus and it'll just help you out there. And then from there, you fill in your ISO. So a lot of times, especially on sunny days, you're gonna actually need to stop down your aperture to say f8, f10, something like that, because there's just so much light. Even if you set your ISO all the way down as low as it can go, you're actually still gonna need a wider aperture to kind of make your exposure proper. So that's something to consider, and it's why I set it up that way, because if I have my frame rate set, that's going to impact shutter speed. Shutter speed, really, you don't have anything to change in shutter speed. It's kind of set based on what your frame rate is. And then aperture, I kind of set to what I want to have. A lot of times I still try to keep it as a shallow depth of field, but again, it's impacted by how much light you have. So if it's a really bright sunny day, even if you drop your ISO all the way down low, you still might need to adjust your aperture to a little wider to get that proper exposure, which you're gonna see on your histogram. Okay, right now it's a cloudy day, so let's see what I have set up right now. So I'm shooting at 60p. I have it at shutter angle, but if I had it shutter speed, I'd need to be at 1/120. And right now I'm at f5, just to give me a little bit more depth of field, and I'm at ISO 160, and you can see the histogram there. I want to try to have the light pushed to the right on the histogram, which is going to give me a bright scene and some nice proper exposure there. Now I can probably punch up my ISO a little bit more, but you can kind of adjust based on what you want and the look for the footage there. If you figure out your frame rate, that's going to impact shutter speed, and then just go through and adjust your exposure with your aperture and ISO based on what the available light is telling you, what your histogram's telling you. Now you can also use ND filters and different filters, which is going to help you get proper exposure, especially during bright sunny days. I use that for my vlogging camera a lot, because if you have a bright sunny day, there's just sometimes where you can't adjust your aperture and your ISO values enough because there's just so much ambient light. Because your shutter speed is typically a lot lower than what you typically do to get a photo. So you have to kind of adjust and manipulate things that way. So there's ND filters really work really well. Another thing that can get confusing with videos is, okay, there's different file types that you can do for video. I typically shoot in H.265. It has excellent quality. You can do higher quality ones, which would be like log or ProRes.
Once you get into the log and the ProRes formats, they're going to require a lot more editing. So you're gonna have to do color grading and all sorts of different things to make that footage look natural again, or as it was in the real world. So since we're talking about just doing, getting into video, using the H.265 or H.264 will allow you to shoot that video and be able to look at it on your computer or on your phone, basically right out of camera without requiring to do too much editing for it.
Another useful piece of gear, if you're going to be shooting a lot of video work, is a stereo mic. So this is a Rode video mic. I have it on my website if you're interested in what I have. But it does a very good at kind of localizing the sound that you're recording. So this is basically just right what's in front of you, directional mic. So you're not actually capturing everything in the ambient environment. It really works really well for windy days like this. I just put it up on here and then plug it in, and you're able to get some good sound that way. So it's a useful thing if you're really getting into video work. I would definitely consider doing this. It really just helps you get, especially if you have a bird singing in front of you that you want to capture that song, but there's a lot of ambient noise. It helps you kind of localize what you're recording and the sound you're recording. Another important thing to consider for video work is it's pretty demanding on your gear. So you're going to need a fast memory card or some kind of CF Express card or whatever your camera uses. You're going to want to make sure you have a fast write speed for that card. I use CF Express cards for these, and they have a really fast write speed and read speed as well. So it really helps you get 4K footage, and I'm able to switch right to photo if I need to, and I don't get bogged down with that camera still recording and writing onto that card. So it's an important thing to consider. So I use a Lexar Professional CF Express card. It's fast enough for everything that I use. I can put the description down below in the video. I don't have any problems with it. I also use a XSend 1 terabyte CF Express card, which is typically what I use, but I don't have it in today because it still had content on it from yesterday, and I didn't have time to offload it. So I use Lexar and XSend memory cards, and I have had no issues with them, never had anything overheating, and they've worked really well. They write really fast, and I don't have any issues when I'm switching between video and photo mode and things get bogged down. So that's what I would suggest. Now, I mentioned I change a lot between frame rates for my videos. So I have it set so I can easily switch between what my frame rate's going to be. So I have it programmed to the I menu because I'm able to just press the I button, and it has a quick menu that pops up, and I'm able to adjust the frame rate there really quick and easily. And then also on here, I actually do a lot of video work shooting in crop mode. So for the Z9, I'm able to shoot in crop mode and still get excellent 4K video. So it basically gives you extra magnification. I know it's crop mode, so there's differences there, but for video work, it really works really well. I'm not really overly concerned about the depth of field a lot of times, so even if a subject is really far away and I need just that a little bit more magnification, a little bit more reach, I can switch right into crop mode. I know my video is going to be still perfect and really nice, and I shoot a lot of video work in crop mode because it allows you to get a closer, more portrait tight shot and detailed shot of the animal you're trying to get video of. So I have that set. I actually have that customized for a button up front, so I can tap that and adjust between FX and DX mode. For video work specifically, it's good to start out on a good solid base. So if you're trying to get some video, you can still do it handheld, especially for short periods of time, and especially with the stabilization that are in these cameras and lenses now. But a lot of times it's a lot easier and a lot more beneficial to just have a stable base when you're trying to get video. So that's why I'm typically on a tripod. You can use your camera bag, you can use the ground to just stabilize yourself. There's different ways you can hold your camera to get stable footage if you're hand holding, but a lot of times tripod's the way to go. You can also do monopod and still have good success. But start yourself off on a good foot by having a good solid base for your camera and your lens so that you're able to get some stable video. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope this video was really useful for you and just kind of going over the basics of what you need to know to start shooting video of the animals that you're photographing. We kind of went over the basics of the camera settings, shutter speed, frame rates, how to get proper exposures, and understanding the file types and autofocus modes and that sort of thing. So I hope this was helpful for you. If it was, let me know in the comments. I'm hoping to do more videos like this in the future. So if this was something that you really enjoyed watching, let me know. Give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. Trying to grow this channel. I'm also excited to now offer memberships for my channel. Right now I just have one tier, which is the basic tier, but it's just a really useful way to show your support and really kind of help me continue to make these videos. So if you're interested, I'd really appreciate it if you join my channel. It means a lot to me. If you have any questions, I didn't answer something, you have any other questions or comments, let me know down below. I'll answer all my comments and try to answer the question for you as best as I can. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful for you again, and I will see you again in the next video. Don't be too scared to try video. It's really a neat experience when you're able to start capturing video of wildlife, but don't be discouraged, okay? It takes some practice, just like everything, but once you start doing it and start to get the hang of it, it really opens up the world to just being able to see the wildlife you're photographing in a whole new light, and allows you to see some really unique behaviors that you've never witnessed with your eyes before, even with photos. So I urge you to try it out. Let me know how it goes for you, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much.